Welcome to another Lessons Learned episode. Today, I'm talking about the lesson in adding a dot, dot, dot. And you might be thinking, what the heck does that mean? Do you know what a dot, dot, dot is? Take a guess. An ellipsis. Yes. I stumbled into this book that I downloaded and I'm listening to on Audible. And I love this whole Audible thing. I'm not as much, I like reading books by the touch and the feel of books, but sometimes I like to listen to books on the go because I want to get the information, but I can't sit still. I don't have time. So I'll go on Audible. Like when I go on trips and I go on airplanes, I use Audible a lot, but I started doing it more in the car. I like to listen to podcasts in the car, but I just thought this is a short read. And it's a great book. And so I don't know where I stumbled upon it, and I'll put a link in the show notes, but it's called You Are Awesome: How to Navigate Change, Wrestle with Failure, and Live an Intentional Life. And it's by a guy named Neil Pasricha, if I had to guess, but it's spelled Pasricha. So, and he's a blend. It's interesting. He had apparently an Indian mother who was born in Kenya and a Canadian father. And he tells a story about how they met, but it was an arranged marriage. But his mother was quite something. And she lived a life that was unordinary when her circumstances could have left her in quite the ordinary. So he kind of starts the book with this story, and hopefully I won't ruin it, but I haven't finished the book. But this was so powerful to me that I was like, oh my gosh, I need to share this. I want to put it in my training for my students because it is a powerful concept and it shifts perception in how you treat kind of failures. And you know, I like to talk about failures and how failures are really lessons learned. And this kind of ties into that whole concept. So let me start by how he started talking about his mom, and I'll just give a real quick synopsis because I don't want to go. He clearly he as an author is very descriptive, and and when he's talking in his Audible book, he's adding a lot of flavor, which makes it really interesting. So I like his voice, and I like the way he acts, because that's really what Audible books are: voice acting. I actually interviewed somebody on one of my past podcasts who's a voice actress. So anyways, his mom was born in Kenya as the eighth child of a farming family. And she just so happened to be the fifth daughter. And where in their culture, girls were considered more of a disappointment. So girls were not, strong enough. They couldn't take over the family business. I mean, there's just a lot of cultural norms that kind of demean women, and that kind of that where she was born. And the Indian culture as well, because she was Indian. So as he said, she was the wrong sex, the wrong color, and she had the wrong culture. So she kind of was like a triple whammy in terms of like her, when she was born, and the opportunity that lay ahead of her was not something that had a lot of possibility in it. Or so you'd think, right? So you'd think based on that. But she, and the way he says it is, it's like, the ending. You can envision the ending, and the majority of women who are born when she was born in that culture, you kind of knew the ending, how their life would turn out. So it's like the period at an end of a sentence, at the end of a sentence. So if you think of her life, story and journey as this big long sentence, and there's a period at the end, and it's like there's no options. That's just the way it's going to be. It's kind of this sentence that she'll live, and it sounds terrible because I mean, we talk about life sentences in jail, and I've just thought of this. I mean, he doesn't talk about it, and he doesn't allude to that, or he doesn't like use an analogy like that. But if you think about it, a period is kind of a life sentence of like, if just listen to this concept of the ellipsis and how it's not a life sentence, right? So what he says is to adopt the mindset of a ... So in other words, the ... is a continuation. It's options. And it's not answers, right? It's the unknown. So the ellipsis is kind of a placeholder to just keep going and see what unfolds. So isn't that cool? So he says a period means giving in to life circumstances when things appear to be insurmountable, when things appear to be like immovable or impossible or even too painful. So what we need to hold on to, he says, in our heart is the quiet courage to change the punctuation, right? So we need to stop putting periods. And it made me think too of pivots, because that's kind of what a pivot is. So you would put a period if you hit a wall, for example, and you gave up. You just stopped pushing forward. You stopped looking at the possibilities. It is what it is. And that's a period. But when you insert an ellipsis instead, a ... that is a continuation, kind of a TBD, if you will. So one of the things he said is, and I'll quote him, resilience is seeing the free will that exists just past the period. Hold on to the desire to see past the period and add a ... end quote. So I thought it was really interesting because he did go into a little bit of historical, how the ellipsis came to be, which some might find interesting. I didn't know this, but it has been used for 500 years. It first appeared, apparently there was a Harvard professor, of course, there would be somebody an academic, so it's getting paid for this research. But Dr. Toner, I think was the name he used, but she studied the origins of the ellipsis and found that it first appeared in a play in 1588. And she calls it a brilliant innovation. She calls it a brilliant innovation because everything you do has a ... It's your unfinished sentence of your life. Isn't that so cool? An ellipsis is really, and I looked it up and it doesn't say this, it just says placeholder for words or something, but it's really an unfinished sentence. And I don't know about you, but I use ... a lot. I use parentheses a lot too. So ellipsis is like one of Lori's, if you read my emails, I often will put ... So, and it's almost like ... and then kind of the next sentence goes on and explains. So I don't just leave you hanging, but in some ways, this ... is a way to just let your life hang and see what's to come, and not hang with a ominous feel, but hang with an optimistic feel. So I love that. So every setback, every diagnosis, every roadblock, every failure that you see is really add a ... because it's unfinished. Keep going, keep moving. What happens when you can see past the period? And that's what his mother was able to do. So she, and I like using her as an example because she's a really great example of somebody who was born with these very limited circumstances, the 8th child, and she wasn't even wanted. And the life of just cooking and cleaning and then having a marriage arranged, and that's kind of it. Never being able to follow your dreams or even know that any dreams exist or to pursue anything like that. But a ... is meant to just keep going. Just keep going. You don't have to know where you're going to go. You don't have to know where the ... is going to go. You just have to know that there's something past that period. That's not a period. It's not the end. It's not a complete stuck in where you are now. So you keep going. So his mom, as a young child, began memorizing license plates. She would sit outside her house and memorize license plate. Now, what little kid really does that? That's kind of unusual to start with. So she definitely had something inside of her that was special, but she didn't have anything to challenge her brain. And because she was a girl and they didn't give little girls challenges of any sort. And so she was just assigned dish duty and floor duty and the things that are typical of what you would think a young girl's chores would be. So she, as a mental challenge to herself, started to memorize license plates. So she, as a result, learned to love numbers, and she found some books in her house that were from her siblings, likely her brothers, not her sisters, but she found math textbooks and started studying, started reading math textbooks and learning. And she would learn by candlelight. She would learn when her chores were done. And that was what she did in her spare time. So what do you think happened from that? ... She didn't allow her role in life as the eighth child and the fifth girl to, that was not a period. It was not going to be a period. So she, at 13, they had to do some kind of standardized test. And she got the highest score in the entire country, which got her a big fat scholarship, as he says. So none of the children prior to her, that's why you should keep having babies, because you're going to have one that's going to be like, I think Mia Hamm, the great soccer player, she was like, I think the sixth kid, and she had older brothers. And so she would play with the boys. I always remember that story. So sometimes you think about these kids who were the last in a long line of children, and like, what if their parents had stopped? They wouldn't be here with their gifts, all their gifts. So she went off to a boarding school, a British boarding school, apparently, that was filled with rich kids. Of course, she got there and she felt super uncomfortable and wanted to go home, which probably would have been a period, right? But she continued and she stuck with it, even though she didn't feel like she fit in. And that was a ... right? She got past the period. But there are always more periods in life. We can't avoid the periods in life, but we have to keep looking past them with these ... So yeah, so she pushed through, and after school, she had to flee. I think her dad died, and so she and her mother went, and then I think there was some political turmoil in her country. So they fled to England, where she met a Canadian on holiday. And then her second date was her marriage to him, because even though she had gone to this fancy British boarding school and she had gotten the best grade in her country at age 13 on some standardized test, she still couldn't escape that culture. She was in another country. She still couldn't escape that culture. And so it was an arranged marriage. I don't know the complete circumstances behind it, but he said basically they had a date, and then the next date was marriage. So maybe they kind of fell in love. I don't know. And if you can fall in love in one date, and because she liked him, the mom was eager to get her married off. So she moved, because he was on holiday in England. She moved all the way across the world to a small town about an hour outside of Toronto, Canada, where there was no one that looked like her, no one that ate like her, because she was apparently a vegetarian. So yeah. And can you imagine? No family, nothing that she's familiar with, but she adapted. She inserted a ... Another potential period that she saw past. And he goes on and uses other examples of his mother seeing past the period. And clearly she was a great role model to him. Clearly she was, her story made an impression on him, because he was written this book about that. It's not just about that. He obviously goes on to tell his own story and his own periods and ... But again, I haven't finished it, and it's so interesting and so great, and it's such an uplifting book. And I just want you to think about, is there any period in your life that you're not looking past? Is there any period in your life that you need to insert a dot, dot, dot? Is it time to start using the ellipsis as a way to push through, be resilient, and just wait and see what unfolds? Because there's lots of options. There's only no options when you add a period, but a dot, dot, dot leaves infinite options. So just get in that mindset and know what we need to hold on to in our heart is the quiet courage to change the punctuation. So remember that. And I hope you liked this quick, short episode, but I think very powerful, because if it was powerful for me, I'm hoping it was powerful for you. I hope I conveyed it well. And yeah, get the book and see, listen, there's a lot more to it, but this was just like the first lesson. And there's more that I plan to share. He talks about the invisible staircase, and I love that. And that is coming in a future episode. All right. Have a great weekend. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraveragegrandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at notyouraveragegrandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own, not your average life.